Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to episode 63 of the Bandwagon Fan. This is the show where we talk all things pop culture. I'm Natalia.
And I'm Katé.
And it is time to pull out your lip smackers and get your flannels on because we're talking about the 90s, specifically the new Netflix series, That 90's Show.
Woo! What's up, podcast? That was that was my best.
It was really good.
That was my best impersonation of the theme song. To anybody who knows the show, That 70's Show, which is what this new show, That 90's Show, is a kind of like spin-off spoof of. Natalia, you like the 90s, right?
Oh yeah, I love grunge music. And
I remember
Spice Girls.
Spice Girls. Yes, that's what I think of when I think of the 90s. The Spice Girls and Kurt Cobain. I wonder if they ever met each other. I feel like they would not like each other if they met each other.
I think he died before they started making music.
Oh, sad. I thought you were going to say, I think he died. Like he'd be so excited to meet them. Like, oh my God, I think he died to meet them. Like Kurt, like he just loves the Spice Girls.
No,
He would
they
totally
would have been
die.
a match made in heaven for sure.
Can you imagine? Okay, dream song, Kurt Cobain's Spice Girls mashup song. I don't even know what that would. Somebody out there could do it. Wannabe and like wanna be a lover.
If you want to be my teen spirit.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say my brain went blank. I couldn't think of a single Nirvana song. Which so speaking of those 90s references, so this show is supposed to take place in the 90s. I feel bad that I did not do this. It's always how it works with the podcast. You do so much research, and then the one thing that you didn't research is the one thing that you're like, oh man, I should have researched that. I don't know. Please tell me if you know. Did they ever say at the beginning of the show what exact year that it's supposed to be starting in?
I'm sure they did. I just don't remember.
It
was either 95 or 96, something like that.
I'm like looking it up. 1995. That's what it's supposed to be. All right. Because that's the thing with this show. So for a little background for our listeners, if you don't know, this is a spin-off of That 70's Show, which was on, oh God, maybe like 20 years ago. Big hit sitcom TV show based in the 70s. And we are now supposedly 20 years later in 1995. And so several things. Okay, the show is new, just came out on Netflix, of course, and just came out January 19th of this year, 2023. And we have 10 episodes that we get to enjoy. And what's really great about this show is that we get some of the old characters from the 70s. They're now parents and adults in this show. And one of the things I wanted to mention about the 90s is I am waiting to see if they continue to make more 90s references, because so far I feel like this show hasn't made as many yet. However, I did just watch an episode last night where one of the characters was wearing a Green Day t-shirt, and I instantly wanted to research, like, is this a legit Green Day t-shirt, or did they just make this for the show and it's not even real? But that's kind of been one of the fun things I think about these kind of like era-based shows is like, you know, getting to try to feel like you're back in that time period.
Yeah. I know they've had some 90s music. Like I remember one of the characters was like singing an Alanis Morissette song at one point.
Oh, yes. Yes. I think it was like there was a scene where she was like, you ought to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been fun. So it's interesting too that this is on Netflix because Netflix also has Stranger Things, which takes place in the 80s. And I'm sure a lot of these shows, you know, it's the accuracy and the fact checking is probably going to be based a lot on who the writers are of the show. But I also feel like Netflix has a pretty good sense of control on their shows. So I'm sure they're also vetting all of the references that get made on this show to make sure that they're accurate to the time period. But that's always been one of the greatest things about Stranger Things is that like costumes, set, like references, music, everything. It's like so time appropriate to whatever year they're in. Um, and I don't know, I was just curious because yeah, I feel like you know a lot about 90s. Like, has this show felt 90s enough for you?
I feel like the clothes are good, but I think the main character, Leia, her like hair and makeup doesn't seem that 90s to me, but I
Yeah.
can look past it.
Yeah. I agree. I know. I'm like, I know that like they can't make probably everything be like exactly on point, but I don't know. For me, I feel like some of their outfits I'm like could be more 90s. And you make a good point about like hair and makeup. Um, but anyway, so we should introduce a little bit about this show. So first off, I want to say like Natalia and I are going to try not to have too many spoilers and just more talk about the characters and what they're like and kind of like a kind of what the show's about. But so we're probably not going to leak any like big details for anybody who wants to just watch the show and enjoy. Um, so yeah, Natalia, you mentioned our first character, Leia.
Yeah. One
Um,
of my
go ahead.
favorite things about the 90s show is that not only do they include characters from the 70s show, but the characters in the 90s show are some of them are like the kids of the original characters, which is really cool. So we have
Mhm,
our main character, Leia, and I think it's funny. You can tell they totally named her after Princess Leia because
mhm,
Eric, her dad, is a huge Star Wars nerd.
mhm,
And so she's Eric and Donna's daughter, and they were like the main couple in that 70s show. So it is cute to
mhm,
see that like they're still together after all this time.
mhm,
But she comes back to Point Place, which is the town where her parents are from, and their grandparents still live there, and they're coming to visit the grandparents. And then the daughter, Leia, decides to stay the whole summer without her parents.
mhm. Yeah, it's like it's supposed to be like that they're only there for one day, like 4th of July. But then, yeah, Leia ends up kind of meeting like the neighborhood crew, I guess you could say. Like, I don't know if they all live close to each other, but the way that this show, and especially like the 70s show as well, like it always felt like they all lived like close together and would just like
Yeah, I
hang
mean,
out
it's
a
a
lot.
small town. They
It's
all
a small town, exactly. And like honestly, if anybody remembers like the iconic theme song, which funny enough too, for this show, they took the same theme song, but they made it like 90s like Riot Girl sounding.
yeah.
But like the lyrics are like not a thing to do but talk to you. You know, we're all right and like it's all about like hanging out down the street.
Yeah.
The same old thing you did last week. Like that's I think that's always been the vibe of the original, and now that's the same vibe with this show where it's like every episode has now just been kind of like Leia getting to know this friend group. You know, she's staying for the summer with her. So yeah, she decides to stay for the summer with her grandparents, which all happens in the pilot episode, which is it's kind of basically introducing that like this is the next generation. This is the next generation of teenagers in Point Place, Wisconsin, in a small town. I mean, even in the first episode, I think it's like at one point Leia, who you can kind of tell has some social anxiety because she doesn't have many friends. She says, you know, back where she's from, and I think Chicago. Um,
She also
it's
seems pretty, like, sheltered maybe, or at least
mhm,
really innocent. I don't know if
yeah.
that's because of her parents or not, but, like,
I think it's because of her parents, and probably because I think because she's kind of nerdy, which is funny because like her dad is Eric Foreman, and he's kind of was the mega nerd of the group of his friends in the 70s. And it's funny because you can kind of tell she's got the thing going on where she's like, dad, you're so like nerdy and it's embarrassing. But it's like when she's then with her peers, it's like she's the one who's kind of like nerdy and dorky, but it's really cute.
yeah.
Um, So yeah, so she's just like, there's like a point where she says something like, what should we do? And the rest of the kids are like, well, there's nothing to do. Like, like there's nothing, like you don't, I think she's like worried about like impressing her friends, her new friends. This is like in the first or second episode. And I think one of the friends just says something like, there's not, like, don't worry about anything. Like, none of us are cool. There's nothing really to do in this town other than just hang out. And I think it like really sets the tone for the show. And then yeah, so we should like talk about some of the other characters. Like, I mean, there's her parents, which are kind of just in the first episode, Eric and Donna. But then what's really, I think, cool is that they got the actors who are the grandparents or Eric's parents, Kitty and Red, who I think are honestly two of the most iconic characters from this series of 70s show and 90s show.
Yeah.
Like, there's something about their humor that almost makes the show more than any other character
They
makes
have
the show.
such
That's what I
good
think.
chemistry. I think that's what it is. Like 20
Mhm.
years later, they still seem like a real married couple. And
Mhm.
it's just, I think it's great that they got like the same actors and the set looks exactly the same as it did.
Exactly.
And so I love that. It would make me sad if they were like, oh, the grandparents moved and they live in this random new house. Like,
Oh, I didn't even think about that, but they could have totally done that, and that would have just been their excuse for getting a new set. Like, "Oh, grandma and grandpa moved."
yeah. So I'm glad they didn't do that. And so they live in the same house. And then next door is Donna used to live next door to Eric, but obviously not anymore. And so in that house next door, we have Gwen and Nate, who are half siblings. And Gwen becomes friends with Leia, and Nate has a girlfriend, but we will get to her later.
Mhm.
But Gwen and Nate live next door, and they have their mom, Sherry, who
Mhm.
she's kind of just like, for lack of a better word, like kind of white trash, kind of
Yeah.
ditzy, like,
My brain was thinking bimbo, but white trash is perfect.
yeah.
Like,
And
but she's, like, kinda, like, cute, like, she's growing on me, so she's,
yeah,
like,
it's like she's
white
kind of
trash
a
that's
bad
nice.
mom, but like not in a horrible way. It's kind of
She's, like,
funny.
I think it's because she's, like, immature, but it's the kind where, like, if it was real life, you'd be like, "Oh my god, she's a terrible mother," but because it's a TV show, you're like, "That's kinda cute."
Yeah, she's the comic relief, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, and I actually was reading, so even though this show takes place in Wisconsin, which another reason why I think this show is so good is because they really work hard to make the references, you know, like accurate to the Midwest. Um, and I do think that like Kitty does have the actress who plays Kitty has that kind of iconic, like whiny, high pitched voice.
Yeah.
But it's still not like it's like kind of Midwestern, like when you think of like a typical like Midwestern old lady voice. But the actress who's Sherry, who's Gwen and Nate's mom, she does like a really good like Wisconsin
Oh, yeah,
accent.
you're so right.
Her accent is like so on point. She'll be like, "Oh yeah, like I was at the mini mart and I just grabbed a pack of cigarettes." Like something like that. I don't know. It's so hard to I can't do the accent naturally, but I was reading that the actress who plays Sherry is from like Madison, Wisconsin. So
Mm.
I'm sure that doing this accent is probably like second nature to her because it's like and it's really funny because people who are from Wisconsin do talk like that, and I can say that for a fact because Alex, who's not here, is from Wisconsin and his mother sounds exactly like Sherry from the show.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So it's cute. And like so they're next door. And then like Natalia said, we have so then like the other two kids in the group, there's a boy named Ozzy. We don't really know much about him yet, like backstory wise. He's I don't know, he's just one of the friends, and I would say he's probably the sassiest one. And I do think it's a little bit of a trope because he's also gay, so he's like the gay sassy one. And then we have the other girl, Nikki, who is Nate's girlfriend. And she's really cool. She kind of reminds me a little bit of how there was like Michael and Jackie in the original series, and that they were kind of like the classic couple, like of the friend group, and they were always like squabbling or making out. And I feel like Nikki and Nate don't really like fight so much, but they're definitely like obsessed with each other and do everything together
Yeah.
like Michael and Jackie. And then we
Speaking
have
of Nikki, though, one last
yes.
thing. I had to say, I did not think that her hair and outfits were accurate to the 90s. I thought she
Mhm.
looked like she was like a go-go dancer or something.
She is pretty 80s. I get 80s vibes from how they're dressing her.
Yeah, well, her hair was like, it looked like she had like a perm, and then her
Yeah.
dress looked like kind of 60s even.
Oof.
But
I have not liked most of the stuff they've put her in. It's funny because I think they're trying to make her be more of like the fashionable one, and Gwen is more of the like grunge one, but to me it's like Nikki's stuff isn't really that fashionable and Gwen's stuff isn't that grunge to
even
me.
Leia, I think, has cuter outfits than Nikki.
Leia's actually does seem the most accurate to me in that like a lot of just like imagine like a 90s girl who's yeah, not grunge but not like fashion model, just kind of like average teenager in the 90s who is going to wear like the occasional like dress and then overalls. That's the other thing too. They have her wear overalls, I think, in the first episode, which
Yeah.
is actually like so 90s. Because when I think back to like movies that I watched that took place in the 90s, the teenagers wear overalls. It's not like just like kids wearing them. It's like teenagers wear overalls all the time. Like that's a very underrated 90s trend, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but
And
then we have our last character, who's kind of, you could say, like a legacy character because of who his parents are. Natalia, do you want to introduce him?
yes, last but not least, we have Jay Kelso. And for those who watch that 70s show, you'll recognize that last name because
Mhm.
he is Michael and Jackie's son. And
Ooh.
when I watched this, I was like actually surprised that Michael and Jackie were together. But then they
Mhm.
explained it by saying that, like, apparently they have like gotten together and broken up like 4 different times. So
Yep.
that made sense.
Yes. And that I think it's like they say that they're going to have their like second vow renewal or something or second marriage. Um, but they are so iconic, I feel, and like it's I think they did an amazing job casting because the actor who plays Jay to me looks so much like a mix of Mila Kunis and
I
Ashton
agree.
Kutcher.
Well,
I think they
that's
did a
the cool
really good job.
thing is, for those who don't know, Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis did get married in real life. And so I
Mhm.
think that's really cool that like they got them to be on this show. And like for the first time, they're playing a couple
Yeah,
on the
and
screen when they're actually a couple in real life.
yeah, and I read an article actually where, Ashton Kutcher was saying that, when they filmed the show back, like, when they were teenagers themselves, that apparently he and Mila Kunis at the time had, like, no chemistry at all. They weren't interested in each other. I don't think they even started dating until either the last few seasons or after they I think it was even after the show was wrapped up, they started dating. But he said that at the time of filming originally, they had no chemistry, so it was actually kind of awkward having a lot of scenes where they'd be making out and stuff like that. But then he said now getting to play married together and act together as a couple who've now been together for like 10 plus years. He said it's like the best day of his life. He was like, the best day ever is getting to work with your wife." And
Aw, that's sweet.
so that I know, it's so sweet, and, like, for our listeners, like, if you really wanna catch a lot of these, like, kinda like, the iconic original characters, definitely at least watch the first episode because you'll definitely get your Kitty and Red, who are in, like, every episode, but you'll also get Eric and Donna and Jackie and Kelso, and seeing them back on the show always made me so happy, and, like, and then also, I mean, we didn't even really write him down to discuss, but there's the other famous character who's also just so iconic to the TV show is Fez. He's kind of like the foreign exchange student who has the kind of funny accent. He is in, I think, the second or third episode, and he's dating Sherry, Gwen and Nate's mom, but like he is like just as funny as ever, just like I feel like every
Still just
single one
as
of those
weird.
is just as weird, and like every actor who came back to play their original character is playing them like as if time didn't go by, as if like this TV show was real and 20 years went by and now they're just 20 years older. Like,
It does feel
I don't
like
know.
that.
That's how the vibe I've gotten from the original characters. But I'm kind of curious, like, of the new characters, like, do you have a favorite, Natalia?
I do think Sherry's really funny actually. Like I'm kind of glad cuz sometimes shows about teenagers or kids or whatever, they have the
Mhm,
parents, but the parents are like not really there or they're not really well fleshed out characters. But I think
mhm,
like Sherry is funny and like I like the outfits and the hairdos they put her in.
mhm,
Um and I am interested to see what happens with Leia and like if she
mhm.
gets in a relationship with the other character Jay because I think they're definitely teasing that.
Oh my god,
Um,
definitely.
well, one thing we forgot to say is neither of us have watched all 10 episodes yet. So
Yes, that's the thing.
I have only seen 3 episodes. How many have you seen?
I've seen 5 episodes, and I will say, I wanna throw this in there too. The first few episodes, I feel like I was very like, "This isn't as good as the original." Like, I like the original better. But the truth is that, like, I don't know if I ever watched season 1 of the original, and I do think that in, season 1 of any show, a lot of times it's like the actors are still trying to figure out, who is their character that they're playing. There's
Yeah.
so many iconic shows where it's like season 1 of a show, it's kinda like they don't really, like, feel fully fleshed out, but then by, like, season 2 or 3, like, they're, like, totally themselves, and I feel like I was kinda being hard on the show when I was watching it, but now that I've gotten to, like, the 5th episode, it was, like, actually, like, making me laugh. I feel like I'm getting to know the characters better, the dialogue and the way that they're communicating and the way that jokes are hitting is better because I don't know, like you mentioned too, like, a lot of shows that have, like, kids and stuff too, it's like the parents aren't usually fleshed out very well. I think too another flaw with TV shows where you have, like, teenagers and stuff like that is that their drama is usually, like, really, like, kinda, like, silly. It's like, "Oh gosh, the biggest drama of the episode is, like, will my crush ask me to the dance or something?" Like
Yeah.
and that's not even an episode, I'm just giving an example. It's just, like, sometimes teen drama on a sitcom show is really, like, one-dimensional and boring for me,
Yeah.
and a lot of the jokes are very, like, punchline-y dad jokes, but I do think that's what the '70s show did so well, and I've noticed that the more episodes I watch of this show, it is getting better.
Yeah. I I liked it right off the bat just because I think the fact that like they got a lot of the same actors, it's the same set. I think that like the jokes and the dialogue like you said are done really well and they're really similar to how the writing was in the original.
Mhm,
And so I think because of all that it really did feel like I was just watching like a continuation of that 70s show.
mhm. I agree with that, and I definitely think it's because they still have, like, Kitty and Red, and then, like, I don't know how much Michael and Jackie or Eric and Donna are gonna be in it other than the first episode, but even just having Fez in that one episode, it's like, I think, like, having them there is almost like the buffer for the show.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, I really the show is growing on me. And I mean, another like cool thing to mention that we haven't yet is how diverse this cast is. Because in the original show, everybody was white except for Fez,
Yeah.
which I'm totally blinking on the actor's name.
Wilmer
Of
Van
Vanderama or something.
something like that, yeah.
Well, yeah, I know you're yeah, that's the name. Something like that. Sorry, Wilmer. I almost wanted to say Val Kilmer, and I'm like, "Nope, that's not it. That's definitely not it." Um, but yeah, the show used to be, like, very white, and this show, let's see, Gwen is mixed, so she's half black, half white, and then Ozzy and Nikki are both Asian, and I actually was, like, asking Alex, I was like, "Do you" 'cause, he's from Wisconsin, and I was like, "Does this, like, feel accurate?" Not saying that I want it to be, like, an all-white cast, but I'm like, when people think of the Midwest America, they're not usually thinking like, "Oh, so diverse." You usually
Yeah.
think, like, white people. But Alex actually said that there's parts of Wisconsin and also Minnesota where, like, there's been a lot of, diaspora of, like, people from other countries. So that, like, he was, like, telling me how, like, in Minneapolis, there's actually, like, a huge, huge, like, Somalian population there, and, I know, like, lots of different parts of the US and cities will have, like, pockets of that where it's just, like, a group of people settled there, so
Yeah.
I think that this show is also doing a good job of being like, "You know what? We don't have to, like, explain backstory," we can just have a diverse cast because, like, that's the other thing too is that, like, compared to the '70s to the '90s, I'm sure that, like, all different parts of the US got more diverse, so I'm really glad that they didn't, like, let it stop them that, "Oh, well, it's a '90s it's the Midwest, and the original cast was basically almost all white people, so we should keep that." It's like, "No, like, let's be diverse," and not just because we're making it in 2023, but because, like, even in the '90s, there was probably more diversity than there was in the '70s.
Yeah. The suspension of disbelief is important when watching anything that's fiction, and so if, like, people of color in Wisconsin is what you get hung up on, then you are paying attention to the wrong thing.
Exactly, exactly. So that's to all the haters out there who are all like, "I don't like it." It's like, eh. Like, no, diversity is good, and I'm really glad that, like, finally Hollywood is, like, making sure to include all kinds of people in a show, and it doesn't have to be, like you don't have to even, like, justify it. It can just be like, "No, like, this character is this and that's that."
Yeah, and
Um
is Hollywood learning that maybe they don't need nepotism either? Because there's also, like,
Ooh.
totally new faces in this show, which I love. Like,
Mhm,
out of all the kids or the teenagers or whatever you wanna call
mhm,
them, they are all people actors that I'm not familiar with at all.
mhm.
I think
Yeah.
that's really cool because nowadays it feels like everyone is a nepo baby, so it's nice
Mhm.
to
Ugh, I
have a
hate nepo
change.
babies. I just, like I agree too. It's really refreshing that it's like it's just they're just they're actors and they're making an it's like I know that this show is technically a spinoff. It's not like a brand new show,
Mhm.
but I am glad that they are making it their own.
Yeah.
And like you said too, it's like having no nepo babies, like, just let like, Netflix, like, let's just, like, make the show and see what happens, and which s like, this isn't, like, a spoiler, but the show's already been renewed for a 2nd season, and it's only been out not even a month, it's only been out, like, 2 and a half, 3 weeks,
That's so cool.
so that's really cool,
That makes me
and,
excited for season 2, and I'm not even done with season 1 yet.
I know, and, like yeah, so I'm really happy that they're, like, giving all these new actors a chance. Because that's the way I feel like Hollywood used to be, that, like, you were a nobody and then you were a somebody, and nowadays,
Yeah,
sometimes it feels like you have to be a somebody before you can be a somebody.
so true.
Um, so I don't know, I guess, yeah, last questions, like, final thoughts, like, do you think you're gonna finish watching this show?
I definitely will, 'cause I need to
Mhm,
know if Leia and Jay get together, and I just
mhm,
wanna see what other, like, fun '90s references they make.
yes, and I agree, I think I'm already, like, halfway through the show, and I'm like my interest is peaked at this
Mhm.
point. And I have to admit too, like, it's just so fun, like, seeing even the old characters. Like, sometimes I feel like I'm partially watching mostly because I just wanna see more scenes with, like, Eric and Donna and, like, the actor who plays Eric, Topher Grace. I really do think that this show was kinda like his prime and the thing he's most well known for, which I know can probably be really annoying for a lot of actors,
Mhm.
but it's like those characters, they played them so well in the original show that it feels like such a treat to get to see them again playing those old characters, but now as like parents and older. And I feel
Yeah.
like even like Kitty and Red, just like, I don't know. I wanted to say that earlier too. I think what makes them so iconic too is that like Red just plays the role of the like grumpy dad, grandpa, angry, kind of annoyed husband who wants just peace and quiet. And Kitty is like the perfect, like innocent, naive, nosy, funny, silly mom. And I don't know.
Kind of
I'm
remind me of
really
my
just,
parents sometimes.
I think that's the thing. Yeah, they remind everybody a little bit of their parents, and that's why this show I think is just so well
Yeah.
liked and like easy to relate to. So I'm definitely watching, if not for the young kids, definitely for the like original cast.
Yes, I'm here for
Um,
Kitty and Red.
I'm here for Kitty and Red. I know Team Kitty and Red forever. Um, oh my gosh, I almost was going to mention something from an episode, but you got to watch it. There's a really funny scene between them. I mean, there's a lot of funny scenes, but I'm thinking of one in particular. So yeah, I don't know. It's a great show. Natalia and I recommend it. And thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for checking it out. Let us know if you check out the 90s show and what you think of it. Try to have an open mind like we did. Um, and if you can like, rate, or review to our podcast and subscribe where you listen, that would be greatly appreciated. And have a good one.
Bye, guys.
The Bandwagon Fan Podcast is hosted by Josh Jimenez, Alex Magosa, and me, AJ Soy. Our show is produced by Katé Smith and edited by your boy, AJ. Our social media is managed by Natalia Katé, and our theme song, Lush Waves, is provided to us by Taylor Lewin of _audio. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.